Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I'm Paulina Cossette. I recently held a live call where I shared my journey out of academia and into editing, and I discussed the main differences I see between academia and entrepreneurship. After this, I held an Ask Me Anything, and I spent about 30 minutes answering questions from the people on the call. This was a really informal talk and was mainly a chance for me to share aloud some things I've been thinking about related to the transition in our identity from professor to editor or business owner. And it was an opportunity for current editors and some folks who are thinking about starting an editing or coaching business to pick my brain about AI, marketing, and running a business. It was a great conversation, so I decided to share it with you in today's episode. To protect the anonymity of the call participants, I've cut them from the audio and video I'm sharing. When we get to the AMA portion of the call, I've paraphrased their questions and I'm sharing them here so that you have more context as you listen to my answers. I hope this is helpful. I'm going to be holding these live calls once a month. So if you'd like to sign up to attend the next one, go to acadiaediting.com/live. Now, here's this week's episode. Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. So when I do these, I usually go through this whole 3 steps to become an academic editor, and it's the framework that I teach in my program, Becoming an Academic Editor. And I'm honestly kind of bored talking about the same thing all the time, so I figured I would talk about something different today. And something that I've been thinking a lot about is this transition from academia to editing, or academia to business, right? This thought of, or this process that we go through. I think I shared the wrong. Well, that's good enough. You can see the slideshow there. Okay, great. And let me pull up the chat. I will tell you, I'm terrible at trying to juggle the chat and everything at the same time. So please feel free to enter questions or anything that you want, and I'll scroll through it after. I just can't multitask like that. So anyway, I'm Paulina, by the way. My company is Acadia Editing Services. I'm not giving the usual spiel and sales pitch and all that of 3 steps to become an editor, and this is my framework today. If you do want to hear that, I do think it's a helpful presentation. I'm happy, just reply to one of my emails, and I will gladly send you a link to a recording from a past one. But I've been thinking about a lot lately about this transition from academia to entrepreneurship. And, I know there's over almost 70 people who have enrolled in my program in the last year. And I just keep seeing this common thread among pretty much all of them. And it's this fear of letting go of our identity as academics and professor, or, this thing that we thought we were always going to be for the rest of our lives. And it's scary to let that go and to then develop this new identity of being an editor, or a business owner or whatever. And so I'm kind of just sharing my thoughts on that for a little bit today. And I'd love to hear what you think and how you feel about it. And then if you have any questions about becoming an editor, or starting a business, or leaving academia or whatever, I'm happy to, have that conversation, and answer any questions that you have. So I'll briefly share my story. If you haven't heard it yet, it's also the first episode of my podcast. And I will share one slide about my program just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. But really, this is intended to be a conversation about this whole process. So I'm a former U.S. politics professor. That was as fun as you can imagine it was. I grew up in Florida, and I had 2 tenure track jobs before I left academia in 2019. I did all the things that I was supposed to do when I was a professor. I poured myself into teaching. I published. I served. I did all the things. And as a result, I was completely burnt out and miserable. And so I thought for several years about whether or not I should leave, and is it okay to leave, and if I just try going somewhere else, maybe it'll get better. And I did change schools. It got a little bit better. It was a bit more supportive of faculty at the second school, but all of the same problems were still there: the plagiarism, the cheating, the faculty meetings, the committee, all the burnout, all of it. And that was before COVID and AI. So I feel for you who are still dealing with all of that now. We were also living in a place that we didn't like. We were far from our family, and we were just tired of sacrificing family time and the geographic choice of being able to decide where we wanted to live, just for me to have this job that I was miserable in anyway. And around the same time, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. We had our first child, and we had no support. We were just so alone. And I knew that, we wanted to move to Maine, where we live now, where my husband grew up, and I knew I didn't want to be a professor anymore. But it really culminated in the summer of 2019 when I broke. I was, my son was a year old. I had a lot of postpartum hormones going on, and it was rough. It was a really tough year. And the summer of 2019, I seriously reached a breaking point. And I remember I had this constant anxiety and this stomach churning, and I felt so guilty about leaving and telling my department chair I was leaving. And it was just this perfect storm between me wanting to make myself and my family happy, but also not wanting to let everybody else down, which, looking back, that was silly. I shouldn't have cared what they thought. But anyway, that's the position that we are in. If you're here, you're probably the kind of person who cares what other people think, and you're trying to do the best you can. And so I was terrified to leave academia, but I did it. And we sold our house, we moved to Maine, and I had no idea what I was going to do. But thankfully, I had just published my book. I had worked with the freelance copy editor for Routledge, where we published. And I thought, I had no idea that copy editors existed. But when I worked with her, I thought, hey, I could do this. This will be fine, And for about 6 months, I spent hours online looking through job ads, Googling remote work editor, which is a useless task. Don't do that. All this stuff comes up that is not helpful. And, I eventually figured it out. I eventually got jobs as a freelancer with some editing agencies and some academic presses. But it took me probably 2 or 3 years in between having another child and a toddler at home to get up the courage to start putting myself out there to attract private clients. Like, I knew that that was the way to be successful in this business, to make more money. But I always thought, who's going to hire me? How am I going to connect with these people and convince them to hire me? But eventually I tried, because I knew that that was the only way that I was going to make more money. And, I figured it out. In the end of 2022 is when I was starting to attract clients, and I had just 6 private clients that year. Last year in 2024, I had 55 clients, and I hit 6 figures. There's combined 70,000 with editing and 30,000 with coaching. And this year I've had over 20 clients, but I'm not even marketing myself. And I actually put on my website that I'm not taking new clients because I'm shifting focus to my program, Becoming an Academic Editor. So all of that is to say that you're not alone if you're unhappy in academia. There are so many people who are. And you don't have to stay if you don't want to. And I really want to explore today this idea of what else is out there, because I feel like when we're in academia, we are pigeonholed and we're told that, oh, you'll never do anything else. Like, what are you going to do? Work in fast food? Or like, you're not qualified to do anything else. And, we're sold this idea that we are not capable. And we are, we absolutely are. And so I will say that in these photos, you can see I'm very happily on vacation every year. I do not work on vacation. I do not take my laptop. It is not time to catch up. It is time to actually have work-life balance, which I think is, the thing that I like best about having my own business. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to talk more about it later if you want. But let me get into this question of, what is the difference between academia and entrepreneurship? So many of us went into academia because we wanted job security. I was raised by a single mom. She made $15,000 a year washing boats in Florida. For me, education was my safety net, and it was my way out. And I knew that I had to do well in school and go to college and get a job that was secure, because if not, then I would be poor for the rest of my life. And, I thought that academia was the most secure option. You have a salary and you have a PhD and everybody's going to want to hire you and you have benefits. And this was safety to me. And the idea of becoming an entrepreneur was just totally out of the question. I did not think highly of business owners. I did not think highly of capitalism. And I think deep down, I thought that I wasn't capable of having a business, of taking on that kind of risk. And I remember having a conversation with my undergrad advisor at the time, and he said he was an assistant professor, made around $50,000 a year for his salary. This was like 20 years ago now. And I think a lot of faculty are still making that. But anyway, that sounded really good to me at the time because it was a lot more than what my mom made. And so again, academia represented job security and safety. But then when I got into it, I realized there are no raises, there are no COLAs. You're teaching 5 classes a semester. You're using summer not to rest, but to catch up on all the research and writing you never got to during the year. And now, of course, tenure is basically meaningless, and higher ed is in chaos. And the thing that I've been playing with in my mind lately is that academia is actually a lot like what I thought owning a business was like, right? That you're working 24/7 and you're burned out and you're constantly unhappy. And what I've learned in owning my business is that in today's world, and having an online business, being an editor or a coach, it's really nothing like what we traditionally think of as entrepreneurship. You think of like starting a restaurant or a retail store, and you need a brick and mortar lease, and you need insurance and licensing and all this other stuff, right? It's like a whole thing to start a business. But when you're running an online business as an editor or a coach, you don't need any of that. You can create an LLC if you want to. You don't have to. Though I always say I'm not a lawyer or an accountant. You should talk to them, for advice on that. But you don't have to have an LLC. You really just need a laptop and Microsoft Word and a homepage and a LinkedIn profile. And that will, the things you use, the software and stuff you use will grow over time. But when you're starting out, you can start small. And the other thing is, as an academic, you are already trained to evaluate and assess research and writing. You do this all the time. You are doing the work of an editor, whether it's copy editing or developmental editing. You are doing it all the time in your faculty role. You are grading papers, you are co-authoring, you're a peer reviewer, all of this stuff. The difference is that Your students probably don't pay that much attention to your feedback, and you have to deal with other colleagues who are often not very nice. But as an editor, our clients are appreciative and they're grateful and they're kind, and you get that kind of gratitude, and like you're getting something back. You're putting yourself into your work, but you're getting something back for it, not just monetarily, but emotionally, and in terms of just being fulfilled in your job. I will share an example or share a story from a member of my community becoming an academic editor. This person is still a professor, and she joined our March cohort. So we just wrapped up a few weeks ago. And in one of our last Zoom meetings, she said she was grading papers for the end of the spring semester. And she had this moment where she realized, I'm spending hours giving feedback on this writing that most of these students are not even going to read. And I could be making 5 cents a word, hundreds of dollars doing this instead in my business. And she's staying because her daughters are on, they have a tuition deal or whatever. So she has to stay until they graduate, which is fine. But she's starting now so that once, a few years down the road, her business is built, and, she can retire from teaching and go on and run her business. So anyway, the work is very similar in principle. But there is one big difference, I think, which I will get into in just a second. When you're asking yourself this question of, can I really start an editing or coaching business? There are a few things that I would emphasize. One is, if you're here, you're probably a strong writer. You're probably comfortable giving feedback on academic, publications. I assume if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. And so it's very likely that you already have this technical knowledge and skills that you need to do this work. If you are an academic, you have survived or are finishing up graduate school. And so that means that you are hardworking and you're tenacious and you're someone who loves to learn. You love to research and solve puzzles. That is really what most of business and marketing involve: learning new things and solving puzzles, like how can I put my business in front of my ideal clients? And so I suspect that you may not know the answer to that question yet, but you at least have the curiosity and the intelligence and the persistence to figure it out, right? Or to work with people to figure it out. And I also suspect, this is something else that I think a lot about, is that you are a creative person. Maybe you feel like you have lost the ability or the time to be creative because you're so busy researching and in committee meetings and teaching and grading, and all of that stuff is taking up your space. And so that is one thing that I think, running a business gives back to you, is the ability to embrace those creative pursuits and those creative desires. You get to write copy for your website and your blog posts. And you get to write freely without being afraid of criticism like reviewers do. You get to play with artistic elements like designing your website, making YouTube videos, whatever it is that excites you. You get to stretch those creative muscles and do that stuff that can actually be a lot of fun because you have the space and the bandwidth to do it again. And aside from the creative work you do inside your business, you also have the free time to take up hobbies outside of work. You get to set your own hours. You don't work on weekends if you don't want to. You certainly don't have to work on vacations. That is probably my favorite thing, is that I do not, I think I said this earlier, I do not take my laptop on vacation. And somebody in our community wrote me this week, a few days ago, and she said, she's an associate professor and she's still teaching in the same kind of situation as this other person, that she's just kind of getting the business going until she can quit her faculty job. She joined our program in January. She got hired by an editing agency, an academic press, and she's already landed her first private editing and coaching clients. And she messaged me the other day and she said, Paulina, my partner and I are going to the Virgin Islands for the weekend, and I'm paying for it with the first $1,000 I earned from editing. And I had a moment of like tearing up a little bit, because I just thought, I know how much this person has struggled and worked, and she's been so unhappy with like the department politics and competition and all this stuff. And even though she's not editing full time, she's been doing enough to make money. And she's now getting to like enjoy time on vacation with her partner and have that, have that sense of accomplishment that she's done this work, she's learned this new thing, and it's paying off for her. And that meant so much to me. So yes, you likely do have the skills, you have the ability to problem solve. And so the last question that I will pose before I stop talking here is on this topic of marketing, which I think seems to be the key thing that is, I don't want to say an obstacle, but it's something that people are most afraid of. I think this idea of, okay, I can figure out how to send invoices and make a website and do all that stuff. But the thing that scares me the most is having to talk about my business. I think that seems to be the biggest stumbling block for people who are thinking about starting some kind of business like this. And so on that point, I will say we have spent so much time as academics defending our research and our ideas and our funding and our credentials. And so we talk about ourselves all the time, but it's from this defensive posture, right? It comes from a negative place, and it's a place where we feel like we are constantly being attacked, and we have to prove to the people who are judging us that we're worthy and that we deserve to get the job or be published or whatever it is. When you own a business, you are selling your services. Initially that sounds scary, I understand, but once you practice this skill of marketing, you come to realize that talking about yourself no longer comes from this negative defensive place. It now comes from a place of joy, of sharing your knowledge. And when you talk about your business, the point is not to like make piles of money. I mean, that's great. We all want to have piles of money, but the idea is that you're helping people, that you have this knowledge and these skills that you are using to help people. And so when you go out in the world and you tell people that you're an editor or a coach, you have a sense of pride in that. And you know that you can help other people achieve their goals, whether it's publishing or finishing their dissertation or public speaking or whatever you want to work on. And so we assume that selling is salesy and gross, but I want you, if you're challenged by this, if you're struggling with this thought of selling, I want you to reframe it as sharing your knowledge, right? As helping people, as extending your services to help other people achieve their goals. And yes, they are going to pay you for that, but you're also working, right? Like, I think that's another problem with academia is we're constantly told to work and work and work, but we don't get a raise. It's like free labor is everywhere. That's not what the rest of the world is like, right? We're supposed to exchange our time and our knowledge for money. That's the way it works. That is capitalism. And unfortunately, we have a capitalist system, but that's the way it is. And so when you get your first clients and you see how grateful they are and how much you've helped them to progress toward their goals, you will feel proud. You will not feel gross. You will not feel salesy. You will feel amazing at how much you've helped them and how much they appreciate you. So yeah, okay, I will stop there. This is my program. This is the only thing I will show you on that. It is an online course with videos and templates. It comes with a 12-week group coaching cohort where we meet once a week on Zoom, and you get lifetime access to the Slack channel where everybody talks and asks questions and gets support. We also have quarterly workshops where I bring in experts and we get together. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. Now, as we turn to the AMA portion of the call, I will share the first question from the first speaker. I'm a tenured associate professor and a single mom, so financial security and benefits are really important to me. But I'm also recovering from burnout and I'm feeling frustrated. I've been told that my work mentoring students and helping them with their dissertations is now a liability for my promotion to full professor. I've always loved editing and coaching, especially helping students with their writing struggles, imposter syndrome, and neurodivergence.
But with so many people leaving academia now, I'm wondering what the editing and coaching landscape looks like for someone with my skill set. I'd appreciate your thoughts on this.
I'm hearing sort of a couple of different things in what you were saying. The first question about, being a single mom and needing the financial stability, I totally understand that, because my mom was a single mom. But so in that situation, yes, if you were to just like suddenly quit your faculty job and start editing, it's going to take time to build up to having a solid base of private clients, right? So, and for somebody in your situation, and I was lucky that my husband had a job waiting for us in Maine. And so, we couldn't have lived on just his salary forever, but it was enough to, tide us over while I got going. I think your situation is, there's quite a few people in my program who have a similar situation. It's the kind of thing where you would want to start editing or coaching on the side, build it up, and once you get to the point that you feel comfortable with it, maybe in a year, do it for a year while you're still teaching. And at that point, you know what you're doing, you know how to market yourself, you've got a clear framework for the coaching that you want to do, you know how to talk to clients. I think that's a big part of it, is learning marketing speak. We're used to like writing as academics, and marketing is obviously very different. And so you have to work on that messaging. But once you get to that point and it feels comfortable and you have a steady stream of clients, then I don't think you have to worry about not having a stable income. It does take hustle. It does take work, right? But I have never worked since I've been doing this, I've never worked more than 40 hours in a week, ever. And as a professor, I mean, like I said, I was working 7 days a week and God knows how many hours. So that's that aspect. In terms of deciding what kind of coaching you do, that is a process that we go through in the program, where the two questions that I would encourage you to ask yourself and to think on, or maybe journal on if you like to do that, is who do I want to work with? Because when you're starting a business, you're starting from a blank slate, and you should be crafting the life that you want for yourself. If you like working with grad students, you can do that. If you don't like working with grad students, it's fine. You don't have to do that, right? Think about, who do you want to serve? Who do you want to spend your days talking to? And then the second question is, what problem are you going to solve for them? And this is usually... Sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dog. She's annoying. But this what problem can you solve for them is usually something that you have overcome yourself. So it could be publishing. It could be finishing a dissertation. It could be time management. There's somebody in our program who is trained in working with people with executive function challenges, ADHD and that kind of thing, right? Whatever it is that you love, maybe this is a struggle you've had in your own life and you've figured out how to solve that problem, and you have a framework that you can teach to other people. That's what you want to build your niche around. So those are the two questions I would say if you're thinking of coaching. And it sort of applies to editing as well. Try to answer that. Think on that, what brings you joy, and what you would want to do.
Here's our next question. Do you foresee a continued need for editorial professionals as AI becomes more prevalent?
Then the last part of the question about AI, editors have different opinions on this, but I will give you my take. AI is here. It is not going away, right? We have, from what I've seen, from what I've heard in conversation in the editor groups and, talking with clients and stuff, it seems that there are a lot of people in the natural sciences who are using it to write their academic papers. We've all heard of like the article that gets published and it has the, let me know if you want me to give you some more ideas in it, or whatever, like ChatGPT says, that they forgot to delete. There are companies called editing agencies. These are the websites where scholars go to and they upload their paper, and a freelance editor will edit that paper for the company, for the client, and then it gets sent back. That's how I got my start editing, and that's actually how I encouraged my initial cohort members to start, because you can do on-the-job training. It doesn't pay well at all, but it's a way for you to practice and get paid at the same time. What we're seeing now is a huge decline in the amount of work available from these agencies. And what I think is going on is that these people who used to take their work to the editing agencies, many of them, English is not their first language, and they also don't have the budget or the connections to hire, a an individual editor. And so they would go to the agencies. Well, now they have AI, right? And they're using AI to do translations, to do basic editing. And so, but at the same time, I don't think those people were going to hire me or someone else as an editor anyway. And so my take is that the people who worked one-on-one with editors are going to continue to work one-on-one with editors, because an editor and a coach, certainly a coach, gives so much more than just, fixing your typos and formatting and all of that. An editor is a person in your corner. They're a supporter. They're a teammate. They're somebody that you can get honest feedback from without being judged, right? If you share your paper with a department chair or a colleague, you're worried that they're going to judge you. And they probably will, because most of them are like that. Anyway, so I showed you, I've had plenty of clients. I have people still coming to my website every day, and I've been just sending them to the people in my program because I'm not really doing much editing anymore. The agencies, there's a range. Most of them, it's the ones that I encourage people to go to. They pay 1.5 cents per word US. The students in my program are making around $20 an hour at that rate. That's for the first papers that they start with, being novice editors, trying to figure out all the tools in Microsoft Word and all that stuff. When they start getting requests from private clients, I tell them they should charge at least 3 or 4 cents a word. And so just going from the agencies to the private clients, you are at least doubling what you're making on the same project, even without changing your skills, right? And it's natural that you are going to get faster and better at editing as you get practice. So that's sort of the bottom, right? The minimum. Obviously, it depends on you and how fast you are and all that. So that's my take on AI. I am not concerned about it. I don't think it's going to take coaching jobs from people. I don't know how AI is going to, I think some people are using it like for therapy now and stuff, but I can't imagine it's very good. And so I think the people who were hiring editors are going to continue hiring editors, because frankly, and I wrote a blog post on this, ChatGPT is a horrible editor. Like I have spent significant time this year trying to train it to format a bibliography for me, because that would be a dream come true. So if I could plug in somebody's bibliography and say, format this to APA, and it did it, it can't do it. Like, I have tried to train this thing to do this. It cannot do it. And so, yeah, it's just not good. Hopefully that answers your question.
Here's our next question. I'm a former English teacher and reporter, and I've been in education for nearly 30 years. I've been editing on the side since COVID, mostly dissertations, book chapters, and manuscripts in education, sociology, and psychology. However, due to funding issues and a grant coming to an end, I'm now facing a situation with my full-time job where I can no longer apply for new grants. My research area, which includes DEI and global citizenship, is not considered a priority by the administration. As a result, my job will be reduced to 60% starting September 30th, and I need to pivot back to building my business to make up for the loss of income. How can I start attracting clients?
So again, I hear sort of two things in this. One is the political situation, which I don't deny that that is affecting research right now, right? My husband works in Alzheimer's research. We were very, well, still sort of scared that, the funding for his lab is going to get cut. Thankfully, it hasn't yet. But I am likening that situation to COVID, where, all the restaurants during COVID and retail stores and all this were understandably terrified, and many of them went out of business. But there were also a lot that pivoted and found ways to make it through. They offered, right here in Maine, you could buy takeout booze and stuff, or they offered outdoor seating and all that stuff. And they made it through. And I am hopeful that the current situation is not going to last forever. Maybe it will take another 2 or 3 years. I don't know. But I believe that we are going to restore some semblance of not dictatorship at some point, I hope. So I think that people have to find a way to make it through until the science funding comes back. I don't think this is the end of science. So I don't think it's the end of DEI. I don't think it's the end of science. I have a client that's worked with me for years, and she does DEI research, and she does a lot of research on Hispanic serving institutions and those kinds of things. And she's still continuing to publish. And she wrote me and said, I need you to look at this very carefully, because she's worried about a potential backlash. But getting to the second half of your question, I think the key with marketing yourself, if you are trying to bring in clients, the key is letting them know that you exist, right? And maybe that sounds like, well, duh, obviously. But I remember as I was trying to figure this out for myself, I kept thinking, where do my people hang out? Where does my audience spend their time on the internet that I can reach them? Because I don't live near, the nearest university is University of Maine. It's over an hour away. So it's not like I can go down the street to campus. And it was during COVID. But where do they spend their time? Well, I thought they spend their time on Facebook. They spend their time on Instagram, on Reddit. They spend their time reading articles, right? And so I would, if you are trying to let people know you exist, think about all the places that they frequent on the internet and put yourself there, right? So LinkedIn is huge. I go on LinkedIn and I send connection requests to people. And when they accept it, I send them a direct message and say, hey, thanks for connecting. What are you struggling with in academia or whatever? You start the conversation, and most people will ignore you, but that's fine because you're still connected to them, and they're going to see your posts and they're going to start thinking about what you do. And it's going to marinate. I sent cold emails, right? That was hugely helpful for me. The plurality of my clients last year came from cold emails that I sent. So all you do is you go online and you find a university or departments that you want to target, and you scrape their email addresses with a Google Chrome extension, and you put them into either your email, or there's a program called Hunter. Rudy knows all about Rudy. Is Rudy still here? Oh, Rudy. Maybe Rudy left. I have a monthly membership called Digital Marketing for Academic Entrepreneurs, where we focus on marketing. And I have a video where I show you exactly how to use this tool called hunter.io. You want to make sure that you don't use your main email address. You use a different one, like a throwaway Gmail account or something. And you cold email as many people as you possibly can with a message that tells them that you understand their pain, you understand their struggles, and you can help them solve their problems, right? So I always lead with and this applies to any marketing, whether it's your website or cold emails or social media posts. You start by agitating the problem, saying, it's summertime. All you want to do is spend time with your kids and go to the pool, but that paper is hanging over your head, right? Think about how you felt as an academic. The papers are piling up. You've got R&Rs that you've never submitted, blah, blah, blah. Agitate. I get it. I was a professor, and I know exactly, or I am a professor in your case, Kimberly. I know exactly how you feel. But I'm an editor too, and I can help you. I can help take this off your plate so that I can revise your references list while you go to the pool with your kids.
Here's our next question. I used to be a postdoc, and I've been working as a freelance editor for an editing agency. I've noticed a drop in business, likely due to AI handling more superficial editing tasks. So I'm looking to start attracting private clients. My question is about cold emails. Specifically, who should I target? How much money do professors typically have for services like editing? And how effective are cold emails in getting responses from them?
You asked about money. How much money do they have? It depends who you're working with, right? I think so. Let me expand on that a little bit. Somebody said, "Is it worth joining the EFA for clients?" I've heard that it can help. I think it helps more for creative writers than academics, but it doesn't hurt to have a profile. And this goes kind of back to the question about how much do they pay per year. So I made $45,000 in my first year editing, and that was just with agencies and academic presses. When you go to private clients, like I said earlier, the ability to earn more goes way up, right, by multiples. When I first started taking private clients at the end of 2022, I think I started out charging 3 or 4 cents a word, and most of my clients were grad students because I put myself on ETD lists, the electronic thesis and dissertation lists. These are primarily in the US. But when you have to get your dissertation approved, it goes through the formatting office and all that. I don't think, it's mainly US, I think. So 3 or 4 cents a word, that's what I suggest new editors start at. Now I charge 8 cents a word. And that is because I've been doing this for 6 years and I'm good at it, frankly. And I think that there is a huge problem among editors, a lot of academic editors, where they still charge 2 or 3 cents a word. And so you go on these Facebook groups with academic editors and they're complaining about how they don't have any money and all this. Well, you should charge more, frankly. If you're good at what you do and you've been doing this a while, you should be charging more because especially if you are an academic. I don't care if you haven't been a professor, but if you're a postdoc, you've got a PhD, come on, we're smart people, let's own that and let's own the quality of our work. And if you are a good editor, you deserve to be paid more. And a lot of my faculty clients have research funds, so I get paid through that, right? Through the check from the university, and you have to usually sign up as a vendor, but it's whatever, it's fine. You talk to the administrative assistant who handles it and they do it. But a lot of them don't, I have clients that I've edited their whole book and it was like $6,000 or something and they paid out of pocket. So I think, we often assume that people don't have money, but people do have money. They're willing to spend. It's a question of what are they willing to spend it on? And you can't make that decision for them, obviously, but you need to be good at, and this comes back to the marketing language, right? Which is key here, is you have to be able to convey the benefit and the value of your work. You have to, and it's not just that I'm going to make sure there's no typos in your paper. It's what are you going to get when you work with me? You're going to get your summer back. You're going to get your vacations back. You're going to get enjoying time with your kids without having that paper hanging over your head back, right? Those are the kind of high level big pick. That's why people drop $6,000 to have an editor edit their book, right? You're going to get, maybe they don't have kids. You're going to get tenure, right? You're going to finally publish that book that's going to help you get tenure or whatever, right? You play around with this, and whoever your clients are, you think through what is the emotional heartstrings pulling thing that you are doing for these people. And when you find those right points, those buttons to push, and I don't mean this in a manipulative way, right? But it is truly showing them what they can have. I mean, God, if I had an editor, I might still be in academia. Thank God I didn't. But, like it can help so much. And so many people are using editors, but yet they don't talk about it. They don't admit it. I've lost track now. Yes, so I think they do have money. Faculty certainly have money. And, when you're thinking about a journal article, even if you're charging 5, 6, 7 cents a word, that's like $500, like for a faculty member to spend $500 to get their article polished so that they can get it published faster or whatever. That's nothing, or to work on their job market letters so that they have a better chance of getting the interview. $500 is nothing to land an interview. Yep. Cold emails. I mean, yeah, it worked for me. I think that's the, because what are your other options? There's social media. Well, when you make a social media post, there's like 3 people who see it. Even if I have like 1,000 followers on Instagram and I still get like 100 views or something on a post, because that's just how it works. Instagram doesn't care that you need clients. They want to, whatever, how they do their algorithm. Blogging is really helpful, but it's more of a long-term strategy. So I started blogging and posting them on my website, and then I also shared them on Medium and Reddit. Reddit is an evil place, and there are evil people there who are really mean and nasty, but I've also gotten a lot of clients from there. So if you can share a blog post, like in the PhDs or professors or academia or whatever, you'll get traffic, and it's there forever because Google, when people Google I just had a hit on my website this morning, how to turn my dissertation into a book. I wrote a blog with that title, and I posted it on Reddit. And when people search that question on Google, Reddit pops up. So maybe my website with that blog article on it doesn't show up. It doesn't, appear in the search results, but the Reddit post does, because I don't remember why it is, but for some reason Reddit shows up all the time. And then people click on that and they read your post and they go to your website and they hire you. So, but that's still kind of long term because it has to get indexed and all that stuff. So I think the cold emails help with the more, it can bring you immediate clients. It depends on the season and the cycle, right? Right now in the summer is a really great time to do it because people are starting to think about, I need to hire an editor for this book I'm trying to finish or this article I want to get out. But it does come down to how you word those emails. And are you pushing, like if you just say I'm a PhD and I'm an editor, nobody cares, They care about themselves. They care about what they're struggling with and how you can help them alleviate that pain. Let me go. There were some questions in the chat. The course. Yes. Let me share the link. I'll just type it in here. This is the information page. Oops. And if you have any questions or you want to set up a call or something, I'm happy to talk more about that. Do you have advice on how to get work with academic presses? That's tough. There's a podcast episode. I have a podcast called Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. And it was with Laura Poole, Poole. She goes super in depth because she only works with presses. When I was trying to get those jobs, I would just cold email them as well. I'd send you look for the managing editor or production editor or something like that, somebody with that title. And you just email them and send your resume and tell them in the email, 1 or 2 sentences, include the style guides that you work in, like APA or Chicago or whatever. And it's just honestly, it's a crapshoot if they need somebody or not. I'm not a big fan of working for academic presses unless you're trying to just get practice in the beginning, because they also don't pay well. Unless you're working for like Oxford or Cambridge or one of those big time ones, they don't pay well. And to get a job with them, you have to like have the Chicago Manual of Style memorized, and that's not my kind of editing. I don't really like doing that kind of stuff. But yeah. I worked for Edward Elgar for a long time. They were really nice, but they paid like just under 1 cent per word. And I was consistently making like $40 an hour. And I ended up leaving because I could make $100 an hour or more, with my own clients. So, wish I had a developmental editor. Yeah. It's a shame that most people don't even know they exist. I didn't know they existed.
Here's another question. What are ETD lists?
And if you can get on some of those electronic thesis and dissertation lists, that's a big help too, because you just email the formatting office, like thesis at whoever.edu or whatever it is. And if you can get on the list, you're there forever. The students come through and look at the list of editors and contact you if they like the looks of your work or your website. It helps to start with schools that you're affiliated with. So like if you went to UF, you contact them and say you're an alum. That's also a good strategy for cold emailing is say, I got my PhD at UF and blah, blah, blah with your cold email. Because I think it's anything you can do to hook somebody early on so they don't hit delete can help. I will also put, this is the link to, if you're already editing, my Becoming an Academic Editor program is more than you need. I have a monthly membership where we talk about marketing. And I have a library of videos and we have a Slack channel. We do monthly chats.
Here's a question from a participant who has been working in a writing center. As a postdoc with experience working in writing centers, I'm curious about the transition from teaching to editing. In writing centers, I've been trained to guide and ask questions rather than just edit someone's work. Are there different ways to approach this transition along the continuum of editing and coaching?
So it depends. I mean, which direction you go depends on what you want to do, right? I have a lot of people in my program who are self-identified introverts who would be happy to edit and never talk to anyone ever again. I think I felt that way a lot when I left academia. So, if you are strictly doing editing, and here we have sort of two branches. You have copy editing, which is your red pen, cleaning up typos, punctuation, grammar, revising for clarity and flow lightly. And then you have developmental editing, which is more the big picture. Usually this is like a book or a dissertation. Is the argument clear? Does each chapter have a clear thesis? Blah, blah, blah. With copy editing, which is what I mainly do, there is a tendency, especially I think among new academic editors, to rewrite the whole thing. And so that's my first suggestion. If you are starting out copy editing, and if you worked in a writing center, I assume you are a good writer and you know how to copy edit. You correct the errors, the typos, the punctuation, the grammar, and then you very lightly revise for clarity. Like if you read a sentence and you go, I have no idea what they're saying, or you read a sentence and you're like, oh, there's a better way to say that. You revise in that sense, but you really want to be as light as possible and preserve the author's voice. And so I assume the difference between that and a writing center is a writing center, you're more teaching people what to change and they change it themselves. Whereas with copy editing, you're just, you're changing it for them. But if you like coaching, you can describe yourself as an editor and writing coach. And you can say, do exactly what you're doing for the writing center, but on your own. And say you want to bring in grad students, right? There's people who work as dissertation coaches, and there's so many grad students out there who are not getting the support they need from their PIs or their advisors. And you're essentially filling that gap. Or maybe there's students who just need more support than what their advisors can give. And so you're meeting with them weekly or monthly or whatever it is to help them stay on track, to stay accountable. Maybe that includes you reading drafts of the paper or the chapters and giving feedback. It totally depends on what you want to do and what your clients need from you. As you're starting out, you could take on copy editing projects, and you just have to sort of learn to make those executive decisions on, and if you're not sure, you just leave a comment, and what correct spelling and punctuation looks like. But if you're not sure what they mean, you just leave a comment and say, is this what you mean? And you try rephrasing it or something. And you don't have that sort of back and forth with the client. But yeah, there's plenty of people out there who want to coach as well.
Here's our last question from the presentation. I'm at the end of my doctoral program, and I'm trying to decide whether I go into academia or do something else. I hear a lot of people saying they're miserable in academia, and I've done editing before and really enjoyed it. So I'm not sure what I want to do. Do you have any recommendations on how I go about making this decision?
Yeah, so I would start with those two questions that I mentioned earlier, the who do you want to work with and what problem can you help them solve? And I think that's where you're thinking, you can work through those questions of what might my business look like? What might my niche be? And as you think on it more over days or weeks or whatever, I think you'll get clarity on that. You could look up dissertation coach, time management coach, find other people online, listen to my podcast. There's a lot of interviews with other editors and coaches, and you can get a sense of what that looks like. But and you said people are trying to tell you not to go into academia. And I don't want anybody to tell you what, you should or shouldn't do. There are many people who are perfectly happy in academia. So I think it's for you to figure out, what do you want your daily life to look like, and if you go into an academic job and you are aware of how easy it is to burn out, and you put tools in place and systems in place to prevent that, you can be perfectly happy, right? But it just, I think a lot about that too, of what is it about those of us who get miserable, who burn out, and versus those who don't. There's something about us. And I think it's that we give too much, that we're giving constantly, and we're not getting anything back. And there's other people who just don't give nearly as much, and so they're fine. But, you just have to figure out, how do I want to spend my days? Because nothing else matters, the prestige, the professor title, who cares? If you're miserable, who cares? So it's do you want to work from home? Do you want to learn how to do marketing? Do you want to have an office on a campus where you're interacting with students? And I don't, you have to figure that out. But I think definitely the next steps are thinking through, if you were to start a business, who do you want to work with, and what kind of work do you want to be doing? And we work through that in my program. We start by, I talk about editing agencies and publishers, and I help people make a one-page resume. Although, because of the issues I mentioned earlier, that's shifting a bit. I have a course. I'm working with another editor on developing a course that trains you in professional copy editing, because I think the editing agencies are becoming less and less of an option. We've had a lot of people in the cohorts who have been hired, and they are working, they're getting paid for it. But I'm not sure how that's going to go in the future. So if I can train up people in my program, get them the practice they need with practice editing exercises and stuff, I think they will feel confident enough to go out and start marketing themselves to private clients. They can skip the whole agency stage. But we work through that. We talk through these exercises of, what do you want your business to look like? What do you want your niche to be? And you sort of write it up on your draft homepage. And I think that process of writing it and thinking about it and all that you get clarity on the direction you want to go. And, you don't have to decide, right? You don't have to decide that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? I think that was a thing I struggled with when I was considering leaving is, well, what am I going to do instead? Well, you don't have to know, like you can know, like if you financially have to stay in your academic job until you get your next job, just get your next job. That doesn't mean your next job doesn't mean you're going to do it for the rest of your life, right? It is your next job. And then maybe you'll have another next job and you'll figure it out. Or maybe you start the business on the side while you're still teaching or whatever you're doing right now. And you build it up like the other people I mentioned who are in the program. I think it's just really helpful to be aware that this alternative is out there, right? That, like you said, you were doing all this stuff and not getting paid for it. Now you've realized you could get paid for it. Like, you absolutely can. I mean, the coaching industry is like $4 billion or something like that. And so, yeah, I think you just have to develop a framework that you can teach to people. And then you have to do the marketing of explaining to them how this is going to transform their life. Thank you so much for being here. This was really fun. If you do want the 3 steps to become an academic editor or coach, just reply to my email. I'm happy to send it out. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you found this information helpful. And if you'd like to take part in the next live call, you can get the Zoom link at acadiaediting.com/live. See you next week. If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.